Well, hello. Back to my series of videos involving a MiG-21. And we will be using the Kobe MiG-21 in East German markings to represent the MiG-21. This one would be Vietnam. Now, as far as these actual planes being used in combat the way that they were, um, no. The way I'm going to have them here. They were all in combat, they all flew, but as far as them flying together, involved in combat, air combat, I'm going to say no, probably not, but I don't know. Because there's a lot of information, but I do know that the three planes were used in combat and performed pretty well. The first plane that's going to be involved in this, but first let me explain what we're doing here. In Vietnam, 1965, when the United States increased its presence in air power, they started using jet aircraft to go and bomb the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong in South Vietnam in submission as part of their strategy of supporting the South Vietnamese, besides a massive increase in troops that they did. The main thing that they would be doing is like ground attack kind of stuff. They would have like stuff on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, trucks, I don't know, hard points, maybe some troop emplacements or troops coming across. Most of the war was a guerrilla war, so it'd be very hard to target stuff. But planes that would have been used, one would have been this one, the F-5. This is an American version. Two 20-millimeter cannon, wingtip tanks. The pod could either be fuel or it could be an ECM, electronic countermeasures. In this case, I would say ECMs and 1,000-pound bombs. So this plane would go in low and actually be doing most of the dirty work, the damage, the bombings, strafings using the 20 mil cannons that it had. Top speed of Mach 1.6, which is about 1,000. I have to look at my notes here. 1,060 miles an hour. That's as fast as an F-35 can like do. Now F-35 is 1.6, 1.8, so similar in speed. This plane is highly maneuverable. I mean, so much so that when the Soviet Union got their hands on a few of them, they were terrified because this plane, in a turning dogfight, could outmaneuver and take down the MiG 21 in such a way that the Mitsubishi Zero did in World War II in the early stages of the war. Well, this plane would have been flying low, up high would have been covered by this, the F-104 Starfighter. This plane served from 65 to 67 until the F-4 Phantom came in and basically replaced it. It's a high altitude coverage fighter, so while the F-5 would be doing the damages below, the F-104 would be protecting it from way up high. The thing with the F-104, it's not a dogfighter. It's an extremely fast aircraft that can climb high extremely quick. And it was probably the fastest of the three planes in this video. Mach 2.2 had the Vulcan gun on this side. Oh, let me switch it so I don't drop it and stuff. But on this side here would have been the Vulcan 20-millimeter gun. This one would have had improved radar, would have been all weather, and a better interception kind of radar. And this plane also would have had racks here that would carry either two sidewinders or other ordnance. Most part, the ones that are flying in on would have the two sidewinders underneath and then the Vulcan gun. And its job would basically be to protect the F-105 Thunder Chiefs initially and F-100 Super Sabres, but in this case, maybe the F-5 because the F-5 did serve. So you would have, wow, this is kind of weird. Two going in different directions. You would have this plane protecting this plane. And so they were going and they were hitting their targets in Vietnam. And the F-100, F-105, but in our case the F-5, would be doing the bombing, would be doing the strafing with the cannon, would be risking getting shot down. And many F-100s, supersonic plane also, and 105 Thunder Chiefs were being shot down. They were not maneuverable. They're fast, could not maneuver. This plane was not only fast, faster than the F 100, but maneuverable, very light. And in a turning dogfight, this plane could unleash hell at its opponents. So, bringing that into case, the MiG 17, MiG 19 to some extent, but the MiG 21 were brought in to intercept and down the American planes. A lot of the American planes were shot down by ground fire, whether it be going in low. The F 104s that were shot down by ground fire. They would come in low, probably to strafe with their Vulcan gun. And when they would come in low, they would slow down somewhat, and they could get picked off by anti aircraft or small arms, depending upon the area that they're in. For the most part, these stayed up high. I don't think any of these were downed in combat in Vietnam. And I do know that the MiG pilots were very, very afraid of the F 105 because the F 105, or the F 104, sorry, because the F 104 could come in, boom, and zoom and strike it down. With these two planes, it was just basically which plane is going to survive in a dogfight. And basically, what you have is this plane using energy tactics, and this plane. Energy tactics is, as I said before, boom and zoom. What does boom and zoom mean? Boom and zoom means you have an altitude advantage. You see something or your radar picks something up, you come down into a dive on it, and you open fire with your cannon or your missile. You set up for a missile shot, and that's what this plane would do. Guess what? This is the same thing the MiG 21 would do. So, as far as the two of these engaging in that kind of a combat, who would be the victor? If the F 104 had the altitude advantage and the pilot had a little bit more skill, the F 104 would destroy the MiG 21 because of the Vulcan gun that's in here. But if the pilots were of equal or slightly a little bit better in terms of skill, would depend on the pilot who's in the plane. There are several pilots that did a good job with the MiG 21, and they'd be more than easily able to counter and go after this plane if they ever came so close where they may get into a dogfight. And the thing is, you don't want a dogfight. The reason you don't want a dogfight is because this plane is way too big to outmaneuver and outturn the MiG 21. The MiG 21 would turn right inside of it at a slower speed and shoot this plane down. That's not this plane's strength. It was an interceptor. Interceptor means a plane designed high speed, intercept, and shoot bombers down. And that's what the F 104 was made for. Secondary rule of fighting, it could, because like I said, the boom and zoom tactic allows a plane to utilize its strength and speed and firepower, get on top of an opponent and take them down. But if you go low, where you would go slower into a turning battle, if the MiG were able to get by, it would be going up against a slower, not quite, but still slower F5 Freedom Fighter. All the F5 would do is have to cut it down speed and go into slow mode, which is a turning dogfight. And in a turning dogfight, the F5 could take on and literally eat up the MiG 21. And I don't know how many combats of this plane and this plane that there were, but I do know that the Russians were afraid of this plane after they evaluated it because in a basic dogfight, the F5 had the MiG 21. And if the pilot was a highly skilled pilot, the MiG 21 pilot would be doomed in a turning dogfight. And that is not using the speed or abilities, it would just be using the turning abilities in a slow, rolling kind of a fight. How will this plane get away from it? It would use what you would see right here. It would hit the afterburner and go straight and outrun this guy and not be lured into a turning dogfight with him. You get lured into a turning dogfight, you're basically courting death. And that's what usually happened. So for the MiG 21 that go and do any fighting at all, going against these slower planes doing the ground attacking, it would have to be just like the Starfighter would do to the MiG 21, a boom, zoom, and away, and not a boom, zoom, get on the plane's tail and try to play with it, because then once it slowed down and it became a tight turn, the F5 would take out the MiG 21. And usually the F5 carried Sidewinder missiles too. There could be other racks underneath, or they could be on the wingtips. So it was a missile to missile thing. I mean, it could be a pretty, pretty big light show up there. So this plane, the F5, served for quite a while in Vietnam. In fact, the South Vietnamese used it. The MiG 21 was a premier fighter of this North Vietnamese Air Force. Their best aces flew this plane and did pretty well. But when they initially went in, they were trying to avoid combat with the Starfighter. And the Starfighter was only there till 67. When the Phantom came in, the Phantom was fast like a Starfighter, but the Phantom had some maneuverability, but not as much as like the MiG 21 because it was bigger. The Phantom pilots made the mistake of trying to mix it into a turning dogfight with the MiG 21. Hence, the MiG 21 was able to get the better of them and doing a boom and zoom, coming in fast and trying to lure the Phantoms into a dogfight. In that case, then the MiG 21 held the advantage over the Phantom. And the Phantom initially had the Sparrow missiles, longer range, and they had issues with the electronics in them in Vietnam. So the simpler Sidewinder or ATOL missiles, which is basically a copy of a Sidewinder, which this one had, would function better, especially in a close range dogfight. So a lot of Phantoms fell until tactics were devised to use the strengths of the Phantom against the MiG 21. But at this point, 65 to 67, if there are any MiG 21s going to try to disrupt, they would have to do it real fast to get away from these to hit the, what you may call it, the F-100s or F-105s low on the ground, which they were able to do. But I think this plane had really good bad weather ability to fly. And the early MiG 21s were not all weather, more of a day fighter with some limited all weather capability, where this thing could actually fly in vile weather. And I know the F 105 could too. So if it's the F 105 being escorted by these, I don't think you'd get many of these coming up to challenge them because they didn't have all the electronics to deal with climatic conditions around them. And they were afraid of this plane because this plane was extremely fast. The Starfighter it set many altitude, speed, and other records, and it was an intimidating plane. So they were kind of respectful and they kind of stayed away from it when it was providing high coverage of the F fives. I keep saying F-105, F5s below them. So that's basically how it went. And in 67, these were taken out, and you had the Phantom. I wish I had a Phantom. Kobe does make a model of a Phantom. I'm trying to find one Vietnam era relevant that I could use, and I'll do a video just on the F4 Phantom and the MiG 21 because they kind of became like a 1-2 um, fighter and opponent in Vietnam. And I could go into detail the tactics and how they stopped getting shot down. As many Phantoms that were being shot down by this plane, and it gets kind of interesting and kind of cool. And I can go into more detail and give you names of pilots that were flying against each other and stuff. But for this one, specifically showing you the mechanics of how this plane got integrated into combat war. I'm going to use Vietnam first. I could have used the Indo-Pakistani war, but I don't know that much about them, and I do way more about Vietnam. I also had an uncle who served in Vietnam who got drafted, and so there's a lot of interest there. And also Vietnam. If you look at Vietnam, it was kind of a test bed for American weapons. The M16 rifle, which is basically militarized version of an AR-15. That's where that rifle got to become a perfect rifle because of serving in Vietnam, and it had a lot of problems, and they straightened them out, and you have probably the most stablest gun platform for anybody in the world to basically pick up and learn how to use it safely, ergonomics and safety wise for the user. They found in Vietnam that planes like this were not what they're looking for long term. These planes were used, the F 104s were used in Europe real well. They had high accident rates. But then I watched a video with a bunch of Dutch pilots that flew them, and they did not have the issues. They loved this plane. This plane was really good, and if you learned how to fly it, did a great job. And it did a great job defending Europe for like many years until the F 16 came in. So basically, the F 16 would supersede this plane. And as far as combat for the United States, 65 to 67 in Vietnam, then this baby, the F 104, goes away. So, as far as the MiG 21 and F 104 combat, there might have been some in India, Pakistan. I don't know. I could check it out. But like I said, I've got other things that I'm going to do videos with. But I'm going to do two more after this about the MiG 21 because it was an important plane. The F 5. We still have the F 5 with us today. The Iranian Air Force still flies these. It's a great plane. And I think one of the lowest loss ratios in Vietnam. And as far as survivability, if you go into combat with it, this plane held up pretty well. And you had a chance of coming back and not getting killed by small arm fire because of the maneuverability and because it was a fast, agile little plane. And I'm glad I had this one, brought this one out to show because this is actually the kind that the Air Force would have used. And like I said, fuel would have been in the wings. If their opponent planes, they might have thrown a sidewinder in the bottom. They had racks that they could put them on, or on the wingtips and the fuel tanks there. But this long center tank usually meant, I mean, they had a fuel tank like that, but they had an ECM, which is electronic countermeasure and other pod, where the pilot would be able to go and look at all the information coming from the pod into his little display thing on the plane, which kind of helped it in ground attack stuff. And this plane too is interesting. It came as a lightweight fighter. The engines, the J-85 engines, were drone engines from the 1950s that they figured they could put in a smaller, lightweight plane, which was this design. And this is actually a very good plane. It served for a long time in combat. Like I said, some air forces are still using this plane, and it did its job there. Did a good job. The Air Force wanted bigger and heavier things that can carry more, but they did use this. And like I said, it would have encountered the MiG 21, but I don't think they were in a dogfight. Fighting these planes. I think they were told not to. The simple reason, like the Allied pilots going against a zero in World War II. I mean, you're going to have issues of problems, maneuverability and stuff. So, in summation of this video, this is probably the first time that the MiG 21 kind of like got involved where we would see it in the West. The next time you would see this plane is in the Middle East, the Arab states versus Israel, where the Mirage 3 and this plane actually dogfighted. And I could get into more detail with that, which I will in that video. You'll learn a little bit more about flying characteristics of this plane. And basically, it and the Mirage are very equal. And as far as dogfighters, it depended upon the pilot. But we'll save that for the next video. So thank you for watching this. A little bit informal with descriptives and stuff, but I just want to kind of show you how this plane started to get involved in combat, and we will see more in the next couple of videos. Have a nice Memorial Day weekend, and hope to see you all soon.